Hi guys, welcome to chapter 3 where we're talking about including parents and families in the assessment process. So IDEA 2004 really expressly encourages and requires that schools strengthen their family school partnerships and really increase the involvement of families in the special education assessment and special education intervention process. So this has been a real big push over the last 10 years or so to really increase our relationships and increase the involvement of families throughout the special education process, all the way from referral to the delivery of services. Involving parents and having good, solid communication with families really benefits everyone, from the child all the way up to the teacher and obviously the parents themselves. Parents can provide some really valuable information to teams about their student, about their child, because they obviously see the child and interact with the child in a much more broad context than we have the opportunity to observe or interact with the child at school. They can provide information about the child's daily living skills, about their relationship skills with their family members, give us information about their community skills, and really have a more broad perspective on the child's functioning, and things that motivate them, and just can really expand our understanding of the child, what makes them tick, and what type of skills that they have. Also, involving families more in the process really serves to build trust and to strengthen our relationship with the families, which obviously has positive benefits for everyone. As I mentioned, the IDEA reauthorization in 2004 really specifically included some provisions aimed at strengthening parent-school partnerships. It really emphasizes parent participation and involvement in the evaluation and the IEP. So really including families all the way from referral through providing services and evaluating the student's IEP on an ongoing basis. They really want to know what parents would like to see. They want to see parents' concerns addressed in the evaluation and the IEP, and they just really want to see a lot of parent involvement. That's something that they're really specifically focused on and really looking for in the event that you are audited by the Office for Exceptional Children. Table 3-1 in your text provides a really good summary really of the parent and schools roles and responsibilities in effective communication. So I'd really encourage you to take a look at that. Because I have a digital copy of the book, I'm not exactly sure what page that translates to in your text, but table 3-1 in chapter 3 serves as a really great snapshot or summary of some of the parent and schools roles and responsibilities, especially as they were encouraged by the reauthorization of IDEA in 2004. So definitely check that out. Your text also divides into 6 themes for effective or collaborative partnerships with families, and we'll go through each one of them on the next slides, talking a little bit about the high points of each area. So they really encourage good communication with families, and some of the things that can make communication more effective and can allow communication to strengthen relationships between families and schools are to make sure that you're communicating regularly with parents, especially if there's something positive to report. A lot of parents who have students that are in special education or students who generally are struggling academically or behaviorally at school dread the phone calls from the school because it's always something negative. So really turning that around as much as possible, just maintaining daily or weekly communication with the family, even if there's nothing major to report, but just giving a compliment or letting them know that the child did well with something that day is great, and kind of bolsters that relationship for when you do have to share less than pleasant news or have those more difficult conversations. So communicate regularly and keep your communications as positive as you can. Don't just save those phone calls for when there's something major or something negative to report. Also, it goes a long way to just be clear, to be honest, and be specific when you're communicating with parents. Really encourage the use of data and specific facts when you're talking with parents. Not that you want to get bogged down to the point that it's an overly technical conversation, but just keeping things non emotional and just keeping things to the facts goes a long way at helping the parents understand what's going on because you're communicating clearly. It takes a lot of the emotion out of it because you're just reporting what happened in a factual manner. It can go a long way in removing those feelings of, well, you just don't like my child, or you're, not being fair in your perception of their behavior versus other children. When you have some data or you have some specific information to relay, it really can go a long way in kind of calming some of those concerns or some of that defensiveness that we might run into when we communicate with parents. So data and facts go a long way with positive things too, but they're especially important if we have a behavioral challenge or an academic concern that we need to communicate with the parents regarding. Always, always, always use person first language. I know that you talk about that a lot in your other classes, but this is super, super important when we are communicating with parents. Again, especially if there is some difficulty in the communication or something that's difficult or negative that we need to communicate with. It's important that we are as respectful as we possibly can be, and using person first language is just one of those ways to extend that courtesy and that professionalism in our interaction with parents. Also, really avoiding the use of jargon. We throw around a lot of acronyms and a lot of, special ed terms when we talk, and just kind of being mindful of those and making sure that we're not off-putting or distancing ourselves from parents in communication by using jargon and by using words or terms that would not be relevant to parents. Sometimes it can be uncomfortable for them to have to speak up and say, I don't understand what you're talking about, or worse yet, they think that they know what you're talking about, and sometimes there is just a misunderstanding between what you said or what you meant and what they interpreted. So just try to really use your perspective taking and keep in mind that parents aren't school professionals, and really avoid the use of jargon and of acronyms for sure with parents. Also, just be aware in regard to email considerations or email communication. Some just really obvious considerations, including that, anytime you have written communication with a parent, whether it's in a text message or an email, you don't have the benefit of your tone of voice. It can be easy to misinterpret or misunderstand information in an email. So oftentimes face-to-face or phone conversations are just the best route, especially if there is some sensitivity in what you need to communicate. And also be aware in your email communications with other professionals in the school that anytime you communicate about a child, whether you use their name or not, even if you're just using initials or things like that, that does become part of the student's educational record, and it is subject to parent review. So just be aware that you oftentimes don't have the level of privacy that you might think that you do communicating with other professionals about a child via email. Those are still educational records. Again, even if you're just reporting in, initials or, things like that, sometimes people will feel that they kind of skirt around that becoming part of the child's educational record if they don't use their full name. But that is not in fact true. If you're communicating about that child, it is indeed part of their educational record, and then it's something that parents can see. So sometimes, we've communicated with other people in a way that we might not want the parent to see, or if they would see that, it would not further our relationship with parents. So, just really keep that in the forefront and be respectful and professional in your communication about children at all times, whether it's face-to-face, whether it's an email, whether it's with the parent or with another professional. Commitment is another area um, that your text discusses in furthering our relationship with parents. And commitment is defined or viewed as being caring, flexible, consistent, and accessible to parents. This really includes perspective taking and just kind of understanding, what the parent is going through and what it must be like to walk in their shoes. Making the school a really welcoming place for parents, so that they feel comfortable there. You acknowledge their presence soon after they come into the school. Things are easily labeled. It's easy for them to find their way around. Just making sure that their visit to the school is encouraging and supportive, and doesn't make them feel overwhelmed or excluded. Also, issues of confidentiality and privacy are very important. If a parent finds out that you have let something out that they shared with you in confidence, or that you are, otherwise not respecting their privacy, that can really be a huge detriment in their trust and, their ability to build a relationship with you. So in addition to just, maintaining confidentiality and privacy for professionalism, it's really important in terms of relationship building and making parents feel comfortable and safe. Also, we can certainly consider, what we call surround care or wraparound services, where we address the family's needs, not just in regard to the student's academic achievement or things that are immediately relevant to school, but if we know that a family has a need for, maybe providing food for their child over the weekend, or they don't have a warm coat for the winter, or, there are just a myriad of other needs or concerns that might crop up. Maybe the child's not participating in extracurriculars because there are transportation needs, things of that nature. If we become aware of a need that a family has, it can really go a long way for us to step in and see if we can, meet those needs in some way in collaboration with a family. So really having a commitment to go beyond just the school day, go beyond the classroom, and really help the family, address other needs that might arise. Equality is another area that is mentioned and outlined in your text, and this really has a lot to do with being an advocate for children and families' needs, validating parents' concerns, really empowering parents to be an active member and an active role on the team, avoiding power plays, just really respecting parents as an equal member and an equal partner in their child's education, not pulling rank or um, you know, having a big issue with authority, I guess, in our dealings with parents, but just really recognizing and respecting their role on the team and appreciating them as an equal partner. Always being willing and able to listen to families and hear their side, listen to their concerns, listen to their perspective. That's huge. Also including the students' strengths as well as their needs in discussions. There's always something positive to say. There's always a strength that the child has, even if it's as simple as, they're very willing to accept help, or they're a good friend to others, or, they come to school every day. There's always something positive to say. Every student has a strength, and just really being careful to include discussion and recognition of those strengths in our discussions that we have about students' needs and shortcomings, to really provide that balance, show that we care, show that we recognize and acknowledge the good things about students as well. It's also important when we collect information from families that we use it. I think it's pretty frustrating for families when we do conduct interviews or, go through other means of collecting or getting information from families, and then they don't see that reflected in our practice or in the reports that we write or things of that nature. So just be careful when you do collect information from families that you consider and utilize that in some way, so that they can see that there was follow through and that there was appreciation and recognition for the information that they provided. Also goes a long way to prepare parents and let them know what will take place at meetings. School meetings can be very daunting for parents to come in, and there are, sometimes 5 or 6 or 10 school personnel there at an IEP meeting, for instance. So just even letting them know who might be at the meeting and what the role of each person will be can go a long way in just sort of avoiding shock and letting parents feel more comfortable and more at ease when they do come into this school setting. But just preparing them and letting them know in general what they might expect and what the meeting might look and feel like is very helpful. Also, check frequently for understanding with parents. Really take pause and give them an opportunity, to summarize what they've heard in their own words. Check with them and, make sure they don't have any questions before moving on. Or sometimes there are things that they want to contribute, but just giving some natural pause and allowing them to contribute and ask questions and seek clarification when needed. The next area talks about skills, and it's really about us having a good professional expertise and working within our professional expertise. So they define professional expertise as knowing what action to take, being able to take the action, monitor progress, and being willing to learn. It's also really important that we practice within our scope of training and expertise and experience so that we're not afraid to reach out and refer issues beyond our scope of practice to somebody who has a more specialized skill in that area. So this may be relevant if a child is struggling in reading or in math or has a behavioral concern. If we feel that that's beyond our scope of practice as a general education teacher or as whatever our role may be, that we reach out and that we seek assistance and collaboration with other professionals in the school setting or the parent so that we can get the help that we need. So really not trying to be a hero and taking care of everything on our own, but being collaborative and knowing when to reach out and get extra support or get someone who's a little bit more specialized in the area of concern on board is really an important part of having professional expertise and knowing your professional skills. Part of being a good professional is just continuing to seek continuing education, continuing to learn, being receptive to feedback and taking that feedback and incorporating it into your practice. Learning from your mistakes, being willing to admit when you have made a mistake and rolling with that and learning from it and moving on, using that to develop your practice in the future. Also seeking ongoing evaluation and incorporating those suggestions or the things that you've learned into your routine. It doesn't do as much good to just learn things or to get that feedback if you're not going to use what you learn about your practice to make changes. So really it's about being humble. It's about being able to solicit feedback and incorporate feedback into your practice and just being very reflective about your skills and being willing to make changes when needed. Trust is another huge area. They define trust in your text as reliability, dependability, truthfulness, discretion, and keeping children safe. This is just really about doing what you say you are going to do. If you say that you're going to call a parent back, make sure that you follow through. If you say you're going to implement a behavior plan, make sure that you're doing that and you're doing it consistently and with integrity. Just be someone that you can be counted on. Follow through with things in a timely manner. Don't leave a lot of loose ends. Sometimes I'll even call a parent back and just say, hey, I wanted to let you know I did get your message. I'm not able to do, whatever it is today, but I did just want to call and touch base with you and let you know that I did hear this and I'm going to do it tomorrow. So even if you're not able to respond or do a specific action, it's always great to get back to parents, by the end of the day or within 24 hours, and at least let them know when you're going to be able to follow through. Speak honestly and factually. Don't sugarcoat things, don't misrepresent things, but always be kind and professional and factual in your communications with families. Sometimes I think we have a tendency to not want to deliver bad news or say things that can be perceived as negative, but sometimes it backfires because parents may have um, unrepresentative view of how their child is doing in the classroom, and it's frustrating to them later on to hear that their perception might not have been representative of what's really going on. So just make sure to always be kind in your communication, but factual, and so that the parent has a clear and accurate representation of their child's achievement or behavior or what's going on. Really important to avoid gossip regarding families. This goes back to that trust and confidentiality that we've talked before, but just really keep confidentiality, privacy, at the forefront, and just really, really avoid gossip. Don't encourage it if you overhear it from other people that you may work with. Just really avoid gossip at all costs. It just really nothing good comes from gossip about families. Again, coming back to admitting when you have made a mistake and taking corrective action when needed. Very similar to what we talked about under the professional expertise heading, but goes a long way in maintaining trust as well. Respect is another big area. This is defined as being courteous and non-judgmental with families, just really considering the family's values and respecting their choices, even if you don't agree with them yourself. Considering cultural influences. If you're unfamiliar with the family's cultural situation, learn more about it. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Just really be sensitive and respectful of any type of cultural differences or linguistic concerns. Being non-biased, again, sometimes this means going outside of what we believe or what we think. It doesn't necessarily mean we have to agree with it, but we do have to be respectful of it and tolerant of families' choices and family situations. And then again, being sure to incorporate the family's values into the educational programming. Your text does a nice job talking about some cultural concerns in the text, especially in regard to students' participation in collaborative types of projects or things at school, or their comfort level with being recognized for achievement. So I definitely would encourage you to pay special attention to those sections in your text where they talk about, some cultural considerations for the way students may, interact and be comfortable with achievement and with collaboration in the school setting. So we do have some special considerations for working with families when children come from diverse cultural or linguistic backgrounds. Again, the IDEA has some specific provisions that really ensure fairness in evaluation from students who come from diverse backgrounds. It's important to select instruments for testing that are, respectful and considerate of the student's cultural and linguistic needs. Again, your text does a nice job of talking about this a little bit more specifically, but just really being careful that the assessment instruments that we use aren't just testing, the child's limited English proficiency, or that we're really careful in selecting the instruments that we use so that we are able to answer the referral question with consideration for, whether the child is able to speak English or, their cultural influences and things like that. Just that we're not relying on instruments that maybe overestimate a child's underachievement due to their inability to speak English, for instance. Also, some special considerations when you're working with families of diverse students with diverse backgrounds. Sometimes parents appear very standoffish or appear uninvolved in the school setting or their child's learning, but it could just be because they're uncomfortable, because they have limited English skills themselves, or because that was just not a part of their culture before to be real involved in school. So really consider ways to promote and encourage family involvement in ways that are comfortable for the family. Make use of outside supports if the family needs an interpreter or maybe a parent mentor. Maybe there's another parent or family from a similar background, that you can, connect the two. So certainly be sensitive to privacy and things of that nature, and definitely get the parents' permission and consent before you make any of those referrals or any of those connections. But again, going back to our professional expertise, when we don't know much about a particular culture, it's never wrong to look into what type of outside services or supports would be available to support us and to support the families, making things more comfortable and accessible for them. Some different components of effective communication outlined in your text include furthering responses, paraphrasing, responding to affect, and questioning and summarizing. We go into these a little bit more specifically in later slides, but always encourage students to read these sections and be familiar with these strategies as they are described in your text. Some qualities of effective communicators or communications include being respectful, considering parents' opinion, considering their points of view, being available to hear their concerns, and, again, even if we don't agree with some of these things, or even if our perspective differs, just being open and respectful of the parent's point of view. Also having a non-judgmental attitude, meaning that we listen without criticizing. We're able to take the perspective of the parent. We acknowledge that the parent, has many roles and responsibilities in their lives. Sometimes the student that we're communicating with the parent about is one of many children in the family. And the issues that we have at school are just one of, many issues that the family is dealing with. So just, keeping things in perspective, keeping an open mind and an understanding that parents have a lot of demands and a lot of things on their plate, and just considering the issues with which we're communicating with them about often occur in a constellation of a large family system where they have other concerns and things going on too. Empathy is important, to just acknowledge the parent's feelings. Again, even though we might not agree with them, just acknowledging and being respectful that is how the parent feels, that is how the parent perceives things, and then offering support to parents as they express feelings or express needs. Again, sometimes this requires us to kind of go outside of our own perceptions or our own point of view, and really assume the emotional state of the parent and being empathetic for them. Going back to some of the verbal communication strategies that I touched on in a couple slides ago, responding to affect has a lot to do with acknowledging the parent's feelings and their emotional state during communication. Sometimes what they say and the way that they're saying it, don't match up. So really picking up on those types of things and saying, it seems like, this makes you really sad, or this has been, really difficult news to hear, or, just really bringing up how they say things and the emotional state that they convey, and giving them an opportunity to talk about that and, work through issues, in regard to that can go a long way. Questioning and summarizing during conversation can be a great way to elicit additional responses, or can be a way to support the parent elaborating. So learning to ask open-ended questions or furthering responses by saying, tell me more about that, or tell me what that looks like, can be just ways to encourage the parent to share more, and can really just further your conversation with the families and help you to understand a little bit more about what they're sharing. And then also summarizing is a great way to just ensure that you've heard the parents' concerns or their statements accurately. So it just is a way to check for understanding, and it's also a way to really validate what the parent is saying, so that they know that you heard them. They feel, like they've been listened to, and it's a way to clear up maybe any miscommunication or misunderstandings that might have occurred during your conversation. Some feedback from parents in regard to their experiences working with school personnel. I used to have some parents come in and talk with us in our class back when we met for this class, in the classroom. And some of the feedback that they had shared with our class is that they often felt that there was a lack of parent input in IEPs. So they would come to an IEP meeting and they would just feel a little bit frustrated because it had a lot of information from the team, but really didn't reflect their concerns or their input. Some additional information that we got from the parents or feedback that they gave is that there were always team members arriving to the meeting late or leaving the meeting early, and that it was just really distracting. There was always kind of a trail of people coming and going, and if at all possible, I know everyone has a lot of competing demands and teaching classes and trying to come to meetings, but just being very aware of how that might be perceived and how that might make parents feel, and just trying our best as school personnel to make sure that we have time carved out, we have coverage for our class if needed, and that we're able to give our full attention to those meetings when we come to meet with parents. There are also some concerns from the parent group that used to come talk to us about pejorative comments or condescending remarks. I remember the one lady always talked about how she just really didn't like it when school personnel would refer to her as mom. So saying like, "Mom, what do you think about this?" Just really thinking about how those comments might be perceived. I know that's something I've done myself, as a school personnel, is referring to the parent as, "Hey mom, what do you think about this?" Or "Mom, how do things look at home?" But just really remembering they're people, they have names, and they might not want to be called mom and dad. I can definitely tell it doesn't bother everyone, but just being aware that it can be perceived as pejorative or condescending to some people. So just being, very careful, with the way that we address parents, keeping those personal or those person first, that language I think is really important in these types of meetings as well. Also, some of the feedback we got is that at IEP meetings, parents feel that they only get negative information, so there's not that balance of talking about their child's strengths and, really talking about the good things about the child, but just really an overemphasis on concerns and negativity. A lot of the parents did share that they felt, their child was not referred to with person first language, so they were referred to as an autistic child versus a child with autism, and things of that nature. So that's definitely something we need to just, watch and make sure that we're careful with. Sometimes the school staff was perceived as judgmental, maybe not being respectful of the family's values or choices, or just not really having an understanding of, why it might be difficult for the family to follow through with a behavior plan at home, or why they weren't always able to get homework done, or maybe the family is pursuing some type of intervention like hyperbaric therapy, or something that might be considered a little bit controversial or a little bit holistic or something of that nature. Sometimes families will share that they're pursuing that type of treatment for their child, and there's just a noticeable ripple of judgment through the school team. So just being aware of those things. I think sometimes we think that our opinions or our thoughts on things might not be as obvious as they are, but people do pick up on subtle things with our body language, like rolling our eyes or looking at somebody else in the meeting, and things of that nature. Just being really careful to respect the parents' choices, respect the parents' opinions, even though they might differ from ours, even though their decisions might be different from the decisions we would make, or at least we think we would make in those types of situations. Just respecting them above all else. And again, the last one is just respect for parents and their choices, which very much goes along with what I said. Respect really goes a long way. If there's one thing that you take away about interacting with parents, I think it would just be respect. Respect for their choices, respect for their decisions, and the challenges that they face. Respect even when it differs from the way we would choose, or the way that we think we would handle things. And the last slide just contains a link to just a funny little YouTube video about a parent meeting. Um, Something you certainly don't have to watch, but just as kind of a humorous summary of when these things go awry. I think it was created several years ago by a parent advocacy group, and it's just kind of a little funny cartoon of a parent meeting where they're not using all of these suggestions for effective collaboration and communication. So thanks for listening. Make sure to also read Chapter 3 in your text for a supplement to these slides. And don't forget to click on the link to take the associated quiz with our PowerPoint slides. Comfortable parents.